So let me summarize. Let me just talk about the three programs that we've developed, and this material is in the folder, and the right-hand side is the sort of flyers for each of these three programs. And then on the left-hand side, we just included a free copy of the latest issue of Value Investor Insight, the newsletter that I publish as well. So the original program is the 3-day. There's sort of a boot camp, a seminar, and a conference. The boot camp is 3 days. The seminar and the conference are each 1 day. The boot camp is called Lessons from the Trenches: Value Investing, Entrepreneurship, and Life. And on the next couple slides, I'll walk you through some of what's in there. But we've scheduled 3 of them. I anticipate that we'll be probably doing one of these every other month in New York, and then we may end up, trying it, doing one in London and so forth. So, I've only scheduled the first 3. Let's see how it goes, and then we'll put more on the schedule. But we plan to be doing this on a fairly regular basis in New York, and maybe see if there's a market for this in other cities as well over time. So the first one is February 6th, 7th, and 8th, coming up in a little under a month, and then one at the end of March and one at the end of April. It's 3 days, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's all of these 3 programs are going to be at the New York Athletic Club, which is exactly 2 blocks north of here, on the corner of Central Park South and 57th Avenue. And so I'll go into detail about the agenda for each of these 3 programs, but there's sort of the 3-day boot camp. And then what we did is we stripped out an optional 4th day that we've given a very obvious title of How to Launch and Build a Hedge Fund. And this is, we did this and we stripped it out and are doing this as an optional 4th day because there's the feedback that we got. This was originally all going to be packed into 3 days. And the feedback we got from a lot of folks like yourselves who are interested in this program is that there's a much, much bigger market of people who are interested in becoming better investors and general entrepreneurship. And when we had a 2nd day that was very focused on how to launch and build a hedge fund, a lot of folks were saying, no, this boot camp's not for me, I'm not qualified for it, or I'm wasting my money, I'm wasting a day because I'm not interested in starting a hedge fund. That's not where I'm at in my career, that's not part of my career ambition, etc. And what we realized is there's a much narrower group of people who that's the only thing they care about, because that's what they're in the midst of doing. Either they're planning in the next year or 2 to start their own fund, or they've already started their own fund, but it's small in size, it's early stage, and they're looking to grow it, right? So we've created a very focused day just on that. So some people will be taking this just as a 3-day boot camp. Some people will be taking it thinking it as a 4th day. And the 4th day, by the way, can be taken by someone who just wants that 1 day. And they don't have 4 days. They don't have 3 days, but they've got 1 day and just wants to come and do that. And so that can be taken as an optional 4th day or as a standalone day. And lastly, the conference here came from a conversation I was having with a guy who works at a big hedge fund out in San Francisco. It's a long short fund, and he said, Whitney, I love this boot camp, and I'm definitely going to come out to New York, but what would really make it a great trip if I'm going to schlep all the way across the country and stay for 3 days is I'm getting killed on my short book. Every other long short guy I know is getting killed on his short book, and and that to me spells opportunity. And the fact that everybody I know is getting killed in this area makes me think that it's probably a pretty good time to be looking for good short ideas. And so, I'd love it if you put together a day on short selling. And that sort of led me to have the idea of, I used to be in the conference business for 10 years, ran the Value Investing Congress. We did 20 plus conferences over 10 years. And so it's pulling together a 1-day conference, only short ideas, only people pitching short, both short ideas, but also sort of lessons and how they survived this brutal period for short sellers. So that's going to be on May 3rd. And that, again, is sort of a standalone 1-day thing, but we have actually scheduled that week. We've scheduled things for international investors who, many of them, I've been to the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting every year for the past 20 years or so. That's on Saturday, May 5th. So the idea is there are many thousands, probably 10,000 people who come in from all over the world to go out to Omaha to hear Warren and Charlie go to the Berkshire meeting, which I highly recommend to all of you if you've never been. Since they're coming to the U.S. anyway, we've designed a week-long program where we're going to do our 3-day boot camp, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of that week. The short selling conference is on Thursday. And then normally we would put the 1-day how to launch and build a hedge fund at the end. That would be the 4th day. But because we have the short selling conference, we're instead putting the how to launch and build a hedge fund on Sunday, April 29th. So for international investors, and obviously you guys are local, you're here, but the idea for international investors is come in the previous weekend from the Berkshire meeting. Sunday, how to launch and build a hedge fund is an optional day if that's of interest to you. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the boot camp. Thursday is the short selling conference, and then fly on Friday out to Omaha. I'm flying out to Omaha on Friday, going to the Berkshire meeting on Saturday, and people can go home on Sunday. So that's what we're doing. So. Unlike the initial email that I put out for the seminar and the 12 guys I initially taught last month, where it was a highly selective process, I got 50 applicants and carefully picked 12 people. These programs, there's no application, there's no selection process. Anybody who wants to can sign up. Then coming out of this, I'll talk about this in a minute, there may be some follow-up. I may form some additional groups of, I think 12 was the right number, and that will be a selective process, but that's not what I'm talking about here. So let me just run through a little bit more detail about each of the 3 programs. So the idea behind the boot camp is to take all of my 18 years of being in this business, starting a fund, growing it out of my bedroom with less than $1 million up to roughly $200 million, and made a pretty good name for myself and started a conference business, a newsletter business, et cetera, and achieved a lot of success, I think, in a little over my first 10 years. And then managed to screw it all up and lose it all and had to shut my business down a few months ago. And so I did a lot of things right, and then I managed to piss it all away by doing a lot of things wrong. So one of the core things I want to teach is okay, here's one of the core things is both my own personal experience, but also my observations from being in the business for 18 years about, what are the keys to being a successful investor, being a successful entrepreneur in this business, and a lot of the life lessons I learned along the way. So I will be teaching most of it. My former partner in the money management business, now my partner in the teaching business, Glenn Tung, is going to be co-teaching part of this as well. And he's got a lot of experiences and perspectives to share. And then we'll be bringing in some guest speakers who will share their wisdom and experiences as well. So the idea is to help you guys become more successful investors, more successful business people and entrepreneurs, and generally the life lessons piece. It's sort of hard to describe, but last month with the initial seminar, that ended up being one of the most valuable and interesting things we sort of covered. And so I can touch more on that during the Q&A. So part of this, we're going to try and encourage as much networking as possible. So we're going to have receptions at the end of each day where people can mingle, get to know each other. Everyone who wants to participate can share their bio or resume, and we'll put together a packet shared with everybody. So hopefully you'll end up meeting some great people as well as part of this. I should mention that the first boot camp we are doing three odd weeks from now, a little more than 3 weeks from now, we are going to limit to 24 people, 24 people. And we haven't set a firm limit on the numbers 2 and 3. I know 12 worked great a month ago, the pretty intense week that we spent together. There will be 2 of us teaching something that'll have 24 people, and we'll see whether we want to do more than that in future boot camps. But so we haven't made a firm decision. We're going to see how the first boot camp goes before deciding whether and how much to limit the number for the other boot camps. What are we going to be teaching during this boot camp? So 60%, roughly speaking. I mean, to some extent, it'll depend on the feedback and questions we get from the folks who are participating. We're going to tailor each boot camp to. We will survey every person who is coming to the boot camp and try and find out where they're coming from, what they want to get out of it, et cetera. So there'll be some degree of tailoring of it, but. I think the core of what we'll be covering will be consistent across all the boot camps. So roughly speaking, 60% of it is how to become a better investor. And the idea here is If we can teach you enough of our experiences, both positive and negative, and help you compound at 15% a year instead of 10% a year, or 12% a year instead of 8% a year, something like that as a result of what we can teach you, I think that would be really valuable. And that's this portion of it. So, how do you compound at a few percentage points more per year over time? Number one is find more great stocks, and so we're going to be developing a sound investment process. How do you do scuttlebutt research, et cetera? So finding great stocks, number one. Number two is avoiding value traps. And my goodness, we have a lot of experience with getting caught in value traps, don't we? Number three, we've got a really interesting module on short selling and some of the lessons from 15 years in the trenches of short selling. To the extent any of you do that, even if you don't short sell, I think it's pretty important to understand it and understand how short sellers think and so forth. How to manage your portfolio, position sizing, when to buy, when to sell, when do you trim a position that's moving in your favor, when do you trim or add to a position that's running against you, et cetera. And how do you develop real deep expertise in becoming expert in certain stocks or certain areas. So there's a bunch of great materials that we've got that we're going to teach that's going to be sort of the core of this boot camp. So part two is we've taken out a lot of the nitty-gritty stuff, which I'll discuss in a minute, on how to specifically launch and build a hedge fund. So this is more, sort of general entrepreneurship about recognizing and seizing opportunities, how to get a job at a hedge fund, how to just be a more effective salesperson and raise money, making a good first impression, developing speaking and writing skills, that kind of thing. That's probably 20% of the boot camp. And then the last piece of it is sort of the mental game and life lessons. We have a pretty interesting module, I think, on behavioral finance, investor irrationality, human irrationality, the perils of overconfidence, et cetera. The 5 calamities that I've experienced or observed that have led successful people's lives to get turned upside down, and what are they, and some thoughts on how to avoid them. Becoming more resilient, dealing with mistakes, learning how to apologize and eat humble pie, how to cultivate mentors and develop friends and lasting relationships. And then I've got a little module that I developed when I graduated from Harvard Business School 23 years ago that I never published because it makes me sort of look like a manipulative jerk. But some pretty interesting thoughts, I think, on how to, both in the MBA classroom, how to play the class participation game to win that game. And I graduated in the top 5% of my class, and that was 50% of my grade, and it worked. And one of the reasons I never talked about it is because if everyone knows the strategies, it doesn't work. So, hey, Gabriel, welcome. Hi. That has applications beyond the MBA classroom, and so that's going to be one of the modules that we'll be teaching. So, second program. This is the one-day seminar. So that's the boot camp. This is the seminar. It's one day, and it's for some people it will be an add-on to the boot camp. For others, that can just be a standalone day. So the idea here is to again share our experiences. Of launching and building. Glenn and I launched 3 hedge funds, 2 mutual funds, and a lot of the nitty-gritty of that. The idea is to, again, help you stand on our shoulders, learn from the things we did right, avoid the mistakes that we made in launching and building a fund. This is designed for people who are someday, probably in the next year or two, not 20 years out, but someday soon, are looking or thinking about starting their own fund, and also for people who are already running a fund and are looking to build it and grow it. These are all the things that we're going to try and cover in one day. This may turn into a 2-day seminar at some point because there's so much to cover here, but we're going to try and compress it into one day. what's some of the thinking about should you launch your own fund? For people who haven't made that decision yet but are contemplating it, we have a lot of thoughts because we've advised a lot of people and had our own experiences with the decision whether or not to get into this business and try and start your own fund or keep the job you have. If you are going to start a fund, do you want to be in the separately managed accounts business, mutual fund, or hedge fund business? Identifying the right service providers, choosing the right fee structure, redemption terms. When do you hire? Who do you hire and when? What kind of investors? Are you going after institutional money, high net worth investors? And then how do you raise money? The single biggest question that people want to know is okay, how do you raise money? And it's not just a question of, oh, duh, put up good numbers and the money pours in. That isn't how, you got to have some numbers to sell, but that's only a small piece of it. How do you make a name for yourself? How do you stand out in a very, very crowded field? How do you get yourself on TV, invited to speak at conferences? How do you write compelling investor letters, put together slide presentations, make a killer stock pitch? And what do you do when your performance sucks, because it's going to someday? How do you manage through that period and not lose all your assets and lose your business, right? So that's that one day. And this is what I was mentioning earlier, which is the group that I spent a week with last month that I originally went out and sent around an email and got 50 applicants for. It's really a year-long program. So it was both a week up front, and then it's a year-long sort of mentorship program in group dynamics and team building and so forth. And so what we've done with this is we've separated it out and said there's no selection process up front. And we're happy to teach anybody who wants to come in and do a 3-day boot camp or the 1-day seminar or whatever. We're happy to teach anybody. If we're going to, though, pull together a group of people that we're going to spend a lot of time together over the course of the year, Glenn and I are going to mentor and help them with their careers, build their businesses, et cetera. We want to pick the right group of people, a group of people that are similarly situated in their careers. We'd ideally like to screen out bozos and jerks who we don't have any interest in mentoring, right? So the idea here is the seminar and the boot camp are our screening mechanism for people, and that's the screening mechanism of them for us. So the idea here is to separate out what I was initially doing as a package with the initial group of 12 into two components. Depending on where people are, people who come to the boot camp and seminar, some of those people will be like, hey, that was a great day, thank you very much, best of luck. Or that was a great 3-day boot camp, and great. And we'll say the same to them, and hopefully it'll be a great win-win. There will be other people, though, who are like, that was great, but I'm building my business right now over the course of a year or more, and I'd love your help on an ongoing basis. And I'd love to be part of a group of 12 people you pull together, et cetera. We meet every month and so forth, like I'm doing with the first group a month ago. So I anticipate pulling together maybe 3 groups a year of 12 people would be my guess. So I've got one group going now, and the first week that we launched it was great. Think of it as it was the boot camp and the seminar is 5 days, but now going forward we're going to compress that into 4, is what we did a month ago. And now we've sort of got an ongoing year-long program where we're going to meet a full day a month with plenty of interaction, in between each monthly meeting. So I'd love to, it was a great week and it's a great group of people I was lucky enough to pull together. We've got 2 of them in the room right now who I'll introduce in a little bit. And so I'd like to pull together additional groups, but we don't have any marketing material for it. I don't know what I'm going to price it at yet. So that's why it's not in any of the materials in your folder right now. It's going to depend on how many people come to these boot camps and seminars initially, and when I can pull together a critical mass of people who I think will be a good group. If I can get another 1 or 2 groups started over the first half of this year, that would be great. But if not, no big deal. This is still, I would say, under development. But I've got one group going, and I think we're off to a great start. So let me lastly talk about the 1-day conference on short selling. I'm really excited about it. One of my speakers is Berkshire right there, who is, there she is right there, BGB Capital. Berna has a lot of experience, as do, actually I have two speakers in the room, Gabriel Grego of Quintessential Capital. Two of my speakers are old friends of mine. Gabriel was part of the seminar a month ago, and Berna's an old friend who's been in the business a long, long time. They are very experienced, great short sellers, and that's why I invited them to speak, and I think they're going to give killer presentations, but those are probably not names that most of you guys know, but you guys certainly know David Einhorn. I'm sure you know Carson Block of Muddy Waters, Andrew Left of Citron. A lot of you may recognize some of the other names, but I love the contrarianness of having a conference dedicated solely to short selling 9 years into a bull market where everyone's getting massacred. Pretty much everybody I know who shorts, and myself included. That was one of the reasons I got driven out of business was my short book. It's been brutal out there, but that's the exact time I want to do a shorting conference. We've got a room that holds a little over 300 people at the athletic club there, same venue as everything else, and I think it's going to be a sellout. This is going to be an awesome, awesome conference. Here are some of the things. I've asked every speaker to pitch a short idea, their favorite short idea, but also to talk about some of their experiences, where they're seeing opportunities, how they manage their short book in a tough upward tape, right? How they get an edge as a short seller, and et cetera. So I've given every speaker a pretty broad agenda. Some speakers, I'm sure, will just come in and use their entire 20 or 30 minutes, depending on how much time they want to just pitch one idea in extreme depth. Others, I think, are going to tell war stories and share lessons learned for the 15 minutes, and then share their favorite stock pitch, their favorite short idea in the last 5 minutes, and that's fine. So it's going to be a mix. But I've just invited these people because these are the smartest short sellers I know that are still in the business. They're still out there fighting the fight. So I'm really fired up about this conference. So by the way, anyone who takes any of the boot camps, this is going to be $4,000 at the door. It's $2,000 for anyone who just wants to register for this conference between now and the end of January. But anyone who comes to any of our boot camps, it's $1,500 as an add-on to the boot camp, whether it's the boot camp that week or either of the prior ones. So let me just closing remarks here with some thoughts on the first boot camp or seminar that I did earlier this month. I picked a dozen people. I had 50 people apply from all over the world. I picked 12 of the people who I thought were the most impressive, but also people I wanted to pick, people who are sort of similarly situated, because I felt like the group bonding and dynamics would be a really important part of this the year-long program. Briefly, I got 4 groups of applicants as part of the 50. Group 1 was, and by the way, all 50 were male. So when I say guys, it's not because I'm being sexist. Maybe I'm sexist in my recruiting process, but sadly, it was the 50 applicants were all male. So the first group of guys was 1 to 5 years out of college, working in banking or the corporate world, and looking to get to the buy side with a dream of 5 or 10 years down the road, maybe starting their own fund. That would be group 1. Group 2 is the group I picked to start with, which is 5 years later in their career, 5 to 10 years later, they've already on the buy side. Of the 12 I picked, 6 of them are already running money, and 6 are looking to launch their own fund and start running money. So pretty similarly situated in that sense. Interestingly, 10 were from New York, but 8 actually grew up all around the world. So it's a very diverse group of people. One guy flew in from San Francisco, 1 from Mexico City, and are going to keep flying in for the monthly meetings. That was their commitment to this. We did it over 5 days that we're compressing to 4 going forward. We had 9 guest speakers over 5 days. I don't think we'll have quite as many guest speakers going forward, but each day I like to have at least 1, maybe 2 guest speakers come in and share their experience and break it up a little bit so you're not just listening to me. An important part of this is I asked people to participate. So when you're working with a small group, I won't be able to do this with a larger group for the boot camp, but for people who then become part of a smaller group going forward, a number, like we had one guy who was a distressed debt guy who came and gave a really interesting presentation on investing in distressed debt and what you can learn from the distressed debt market if you're an equity investor. While one guy was an emerging market specialist and came in and pitched that and talked about that. And all 12 people came in and gave a little 10-minute presentation pitching their favorite short idea, which is not short idea, favorite stock idea, long or short. That was really, it was a great experience for them. Some of them, it came easily to them, and some of them, it was like a really stressful thing and they weren't very good at it. Well, that's part of the learning experience. If you want to succeed in this business, being able to put together a compelling stock pitch and being able to pitch it with some slides and so forth is a really important skill to have. It's one of the things we worked on. Here are some of the testimonials. I won't spend a lot of time going through it, but in your packets there's a little 2-page flyer with the testimonials of every single person who participated and what they had to say about it. It was a great week. Great group of people. The speakers were, the 9 guest speakers knocked it out of the park, and there was really great group dynamics. There was a lot of bonding going on. And one of the things that I felt like this would really be successful if these 12 people bonded with one another and developed lifelong relationships that will last beyond being part of the 1-year program with me and with Glenn. So I felt like we were off to a great start with that. I did a very lengthy sort of 25-question follow-up survey with everyone at the end. And one of the key questions is I asked each of them was, to what extent do you think this seminar has been or will be life-changing for you, however you want to define that? And basically every single person in 5 days said, ranging from a 7 to 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, said that this was something that was life-changing, was or will be. And that's you know, if we can put together a program that teaches you to, you know, to be a little bit better investor, like that's great. I think that would be value added. To the extent people walk away from this saying this is something that's life-changing, like that's my goal.